Hi, this is the training module for Sophomore Guides. Let me give you a quick overview before we start. At the start of August or at the start of January, sophomore students might select you to be their sophomore guide. This means that they will meet with you twice during either the fall or the spring semester, primarily to discuss a letter they'll be writing to themselves in Call 200, our new 1-hour vocation and calling class. In the letter, they'll discuss their values and career plans, and you will help them think about these things. The Sophomore Guide program is part of Vocation and the Sophomore Year Experience, our Quality Enhancement Plan, or QEP. This forms part of our 10-year reaffirmation by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, or SACS-COC. How did we end up with Vocation and Calling? We consulted students, faculty, alumni, the Board of Trustees, and local businesses as we developed the QEP. Students asked us to enhance a number of things they already thought we did well: student-faculty interaction, and career and grad school prep. Additionally, we lose a disproportionate number of students during the sophomore year, while those who remain into their junior years tend to go on to graduation. We have what is commonly called a sophomore slump. Research has shown that sophomore students are especially ready to think about big questions of the meaning of life, and sophomore year programming that asks students to do this has also been shown to aid retention. To think about the big questions of their calling and vocation. Vocation and the sophomore year experience consists of 3 parts. Sophomore year is Calling Day, which is going to be August 23rd, and then the Friday or Saturday before every semester. This will be a day of reflection activities and thinking about calling and vocation, including a visit to the Memorial for Peace and Justice downtown. Call 200, which is the sophomore class, and a junior-senior class called Call 300. You can find the syllabus for Call 200 on this Canvas site. And then the Sophomore Guides program, which is what you are involved in. Of course, we have to have learning outcomes. Ours are: 1, students will experience a greater sense of personal vocation, and 2, students will be fluent in ethical reasoning, because you can't have a vocation or calling without it being ethical. What does vocation mean in the sense in which we are using it here? It comes from the Latin term vocare, which means to call. One popular definition, which our students often pick up on, comes from the work of the theologian Frederick Buechner, who writes that the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. In other words, vocation is a combination of what you deeply want to do and what the world stands in deep need of. Another definition, which I like, comes from the work of Lee Hardy, who argues that vocation is a combination of your abilities, which is what you are good at, your concerns, which are things that you find to be morally or ethically important, and your interests, which is what you actually want to spend your time doing. Another way of thinking about vocation is to think of it as your character, not what am I called to do, but what kind of person am I called to be. This is useful because we do not always have control over what we are able to do, but we arguably have more control over what kind of person we choose to be. There are other meanings of vocation that we are not, or not exclusively, employing here. A vocation doesn't have to be the voice of God coming down to tell you your one and only destiny, although of course it could be. People often use the term vocation to refer to careers in the church, but it can refer to any occupation or simply to the way you live your life. Likewise, the term does not only have to refer to trade school education or vocational education, although again it might mean this for some students. And as I said before, your vocation does not simply have to mean your job. Lots of creative people, for instance, might describe their creative work as a vocation, even if it is not their primary means of financial support. So what will the guides actually do? Students will choose their guide from any existing member of faculty or staff who has not chosen to opt out of the program. We're imagining that students will select someone with whom they already have a relationship, although that doesn't have to be the case. At any rate, research suggests that mentoring relationships work better when students are able to pick the person with whom they work. We will triage guide selections using a Canvas course to ensure that no faculty or staff member has more than 10 mentees, but we will endeavour to give students their first choice. You'll formally meet with your mentee twice, once at the start of the semester to introduce yourselves and again to talk over the assignment in which the student writes a letter they write to themselves in the Call 200 Vocation and Calling class. Students will write to themselves from a source of truth. Some write from God, some from an older self. In spring 2019, more than one student wrote from a younger self, reminding their present self not to give up on their dreams. One wrote quite movingly from his absent father. That assignment is available on this Canvas site if you'd like to have a look at it. Students will also debrief with their Call 200 instructor, who will be me, Dr. Perrin, during 2019-20. You might develop a continuing relationship with your mentee, and we encourage that, but we are not formally mandating more than 2 meetings, since we would like mentoring relationships to develop as organically as possible. We piloted this program in spring 2019, and it went very well. Students in Pact 301 brought a copy of their letter to their instructor. In the meeting, we read over it together, and the guide asked questions as they arose. Students were very willing to engage one-on-one. They seemed quite appreciative for the opportunity to think about their life plans. They also tended to have quite a sophisticated understanding of the ethical importance of their work plans. For instance, one student felt that coaching youth sports was valuable since the sports field could be an anxiety-free zone where everything was fair and governed by rules, unlike sometimes in real life. Another had a surprisingly powerful affection for stadiums, seeing them as important emblems of community togetherness, and wanted to go into sports management for that reason. One useful tactic was to show how students' plans fitted into the Lee Hardy model I discussed before. How did what they wanted to do make use of their abilities, their concerns, and their interests? Almost every student found it valuable to conceptualize their vocation in this way, and so making use of the Hardy essay turned out to be a good tool. That essay can also be found on this site. What does it mean to be a mentor? As should be clear, this is different from the academic mentoring of at-risk students undertaken by the Staten Center. The Sophomore Guide program offers every sophomore a chance to be guided by a valued authority figure, not just the assertive ones who already seek out mentors of their own, nor the at-risk ones we already identify as in need of assistance. It's also not academic advising, which is primarily about class schedules, although of course advising often does have a mentoring component, and many students might select their academic advisor to be their guide as well. Faculty and staff offered a number of valuable tips at our in-person training session in May. A mentor cultivates a student's interest and abilities. A mentor listens and has great patience. Sometimes one becomes a mentor unintentionally. Sometimes a mentor doesn't even know they have been one. But a mentor can, and perhaps should, intentionally be a mentor too. A guide knows that a major does not equal a career. A guide has a good deal of awareness and must be sensitive to a student's identity, cultural context, and background. Must be aware that students see them as a role model. If you don't know what to do, you might be guided by the maxim, first do no harm. A mentor lets a student become more of what they want to be, not more like the mentor. A mentor puts in the time, and a mentor meets the student where they are as much as they can. Finally, it might be useful to think about how you have already guided students. Have you, for instance, encountered a student who decided to leave an athletic team but got plugged into campus in another way? How did that work out? A student who realized that her dream of going to medical school was unlikely to work out but happily found a new path. How did you help them through that? Or a student who struggled to find a sense of identity on campus. How have you helped someone find where they belong? Please ask Dr. Perrin if you have any questions, and happy guiding.